Welcome to Tartarian Tales 23, where we are going to take a tiny departure from Pinto and his adventures and go into this other book that I found, one of the other many books that I've got in store for the future of Tartarian Tales. But this one had a lot of Tartarian customs, a lot of different nuances and facts that I'd never really heard before, details about culture, life, landscape, buildings, all kinds of different things that I just wanted to share. So it's about 10 pages. I'm going to occasionally go like blah, 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 and then skip some stuff if it seems to be dragging on and get to the juicy stuff and details. So bear with me, but I think this one's going to be packed with a lot of interesting things. So let's see what happens here. Tartarian Tales 23. And it's going to start in the middle of a chapter, so talking about this place, Kaffa. Kaffa, called by the Genoese Theodosia, is situated upon a high mountain which descends with a half-circular slope towards the roadstead, where the promontory protects the vessels from almost every wind except the north and southwest. The advantageous position of this town has procured it a considerable commerce. It was so flourishing under the Genoese that it obtained the name Crimstambo, Constantinople of Crimea. Its numerous ruins attest its ancient splendor and great population. The most remarkable things to be noticed in this place are the fortifications which surround the town and the fortress, the walls tolerably well preserved and flanked with towers, and many half-effaced inscriptions thereon. The principal mosque, a handsome building constructed with noble simplicity, and the grand reservoir which receives the water from the mountains and supplies the other conduits. After having given to Kaffa its ancient name of Theodosia, the Russian government seemed desirous to restore its commerce. A quarantine was therefore established, and encouragement given to merchants who would settle there. Yet Kaffa contains no more at this time than 100 houses built upon ruins, and the greater part inhabited by Greeks. The peninsula of Kerch, formerly called Cybernik, is situated very high up the Black Sea in the Sea of Azov. Between Kaffa and Kerch there are seen near Akos a rampart in a moat, which was the ancient line of demarcation of the empire of Bosphorus and of the possessions of the Chersonites. Kerch, formerly Panticapaeum, and more recently Bosphorus, is situated at the foot of a steep mountain upon the borders of a Cimmerian strait, in which it is to be found an excellent and a spacious roadstead. It was within the walls of the Bosphorus that the great Mithridates died. When the Crimea was under the dominion of the Porte, this place was governed by a pacha and contained a garrison. In I-774 or 1774, interesting, it was ceded to Russia with Genikal. This town, formerly opulent, had an extensive commerce. The young Anarcharsis speaks as follows of his abode at Panticapaeum. In waiting the day of departure, I walked up and down its streets, and could not sufficiently admire the citadel, the arsenal, the port, the ships, their equipment, and their maneuvers. I wandered into the private houses, into the manufactories, and into the meanest shops. I left the town, and my eyes remained fixed upon the orchards, loaded with fruit, and upon the country, enriched with harvests. The population was also great. At present there are only 100 houses, inhabited by Greeks, who have no other means of existence than by fishing. A beautiful fountain in good condition supplies a limpid and healthful stream. It is of stone, ornamented with white marble. The fortress, which is in bad repair, contains an extremely ancient Greek church. There are to be found here several bas-reliefs with inscriptions on white marble, as the Venetian lion on marble of the same color, which is placed over the gate of the citadel. Genikal is situated 12 versta from Kerch, on the south corner of the most advanced point of the peninsula. The fortress is on a high mountain, of which the slope to the sea is covered with about 100 houses, inhabited by Greeks, who employ themselves in fishing for sturgeons. The Turks who built the fortress kept a garrison there until the cession of this town to Russia. The Crimea had been subject to revolutions which have intermixed the race of its inhabitants. Without dwelling on this medley of different nations, I shall content myself with speaking of the Tartars, who form almost the whole of the population. I shall separate them into three classes: the Nogais, the Tartars of the plain, and the Tartars of the mountains. The 7,000 or 8,000 Tartars who are to be seen wandering from the Burdan to the Malakna are, as well as the Nogais, made prisoners in the fortress of Anape, a remnant of the Tartars of the Kuban. They encamp themselves in little cabins of felt. Their tents, according to Thuman, are a kind of portable huts of a circular form, of about 8 feet in diameter, made of latchwork, or hurdles of twigs about the size of a thumb, forming a sort of wall about 4 feet in height, upon which rests a dome or roof of the same structure. The whole is covered with mats of rushes and brown felt, which neither wind nor rain can penetrate. At the top of the roof is a hole of 2 feet diameter, which serves as a passage for the light and the smoke. The door, covered with a mat, is as narrow as possible. 3 or 4 cushions stuffed with horsehair, a low wooden table, 2 iron pots, 2 or 3 wooden dishes, and a rush mat compose the whole of the furniture. These Tartars wander in hordes, and according to the ancient custom of the Moguls, support themselves on horse flesh and milk of mares. They begin, however, to build fixed habitations and to occupy themselves in the cultivation of the soil. A sheepskin and a coarse cloth compose their covering. They have flat faces of a blackish-brown color, the eyes small and sunk in the head, the nose hooked, and little beard. The Nogaya are Mahometans, but very ignorant in matters of religion. They relate the answers of a buffoon of Saim Gorai, pressed by his master to embrace the Mohammedan faith. "No," replied he, "I cannot, but not to disoblige you, I will turn Nogay." The Nogays have obtained a great many of the superstitions, idolatries of the Moguls. All of them are, as the features of their faces demonstrate, the descendants of the purest of the Mogul race, who comprise the greater part of the armies of Genghis Khan. The Tartars of the plain occupy the steppes of the Crimea, and have preserved, particularly in the district of Perekop, in their faces a great resemblance of the Moguls. They till the ground and employ themselves in the feeding of cattle, but have no taste for the cultivation of gardens. They inhabit small houses built after the Turkish fashion, and make use of bricks when they cannot procure stone. Their fuel is a kind of cake made of turf and dung, which they cut into squares and place in high heaps to dry. The mountain Tartars are a mixed race, and seem to be composed of the remains of the various tribes who once inhabited the Crimea. Their beard is thicker, and the hair of their beards lighter than those of the other Tartars, who apparently hold them in contempt. Their houses, which are built on the steep sides of mountains, are roofed with turf in a flat manner, so that the inhabitants may walk on them, and they are built so close together that these flat roofs seem like a street for the row of houses which stands next above them on the ascent of the hill. These Tartars are tolerably good gardeners and vine growers, but they are too idle to make new plantations. Some of them who live in the southern valleys employ themselves in the culture of tobacco and hemp. Their dress is much lighter than that of the inhabitants of the plain. The physiognomy of the real Tartars of the Crimea is very similar to that of those of the Turks and Europeans. Their hair is brown, and they are above the common size. The mild temperature of the climate, the frugality of their meals, and the activity of their lives all contribute to render them very robust. The young people, who belong to rich families and noble castes, dress themselves nearly like the Circassians. They wear whiskers on the upper lip and shave the chin, while the old noble Tartars, on the contrary, let nearly all their beard grow. They wear half boots of Morocco, and when they go out they add slippers to them. Their heads are either shaved or have only short hair on them, and they cover them with a high cap, generally of a green color and bound with lambskin. The Tartar women are in general small and of an agreeable shape. They wear an ample hood, a shift, open in front, which is fastened around the neck and descends as far as the knees. Over this is a robe, likewise open at the bosom, with long, narrow sleeves, and above this robe is worn a sword-out, bordered with ermine and other furs, the sleeves of which are short, and is the Turkish fashion. They dye their nails, and frequently their hair, with a reddish brown in the manner of the Persians. They also color their faces with red and white, and paint their eyebrows and hair with a composition which imparts to them a dazzling black color for several months. When they go out, they put on a large robe of white woolen, wrap a white handkerchief round the head, and tie it under the chin. They then cover this with a large veil of white linen, which comes round the face, so as only to leave visible their black eyes. In fact, they are exactly similar to the women of Alexandria in Egypt, as described by Volney, and resemble wandering ghosts rather than human beings. Though the general language of the Tartars is only a Turkish dialect, yet it is intermixed with such a number of Mogul and Arabic words that a Turk has difficulty to understand it. The Nogays in particular render themselves scarce intelligible by the quickness with which they speak, and their guttural pronunciation. With respect to their manners and religion, we understand by the manners of a nation its regular customs and usages, not those which, indifferent in themselves, are the result of an arbitrary mode of life, but those which influence the manner of thinking, acting, and feeling, or which depend on those causes. It is under this point of view that I shall speak of the manners of the Tartars. There is this difference between wild and barbarous people, that the former are small scattered nations which, for some particular reasons, cannot unite themselves to each other, while barbarians are considered to be small nations which can unite together if they please. The former are generally hunters, the latter shepherds or breeders of cattle. It is also extraordinary at first view when we find that the hunters are a sedentary and the breeders a wandering people. The Tartars have often been reproached for their cruelty and propensity to plunder, but it has not been considered that they do not practice this conduct except towards those foreigners whom they consider enemies. As to the state of society amongst themselves, they are faithful, disinterested, and possess a degree of hospitality and generosity which would do honor to the most civilized people. The influence of the government appears to be much more general and efficacious than that of the climate. The Tartars of the Crimea have preserved, under a pure sky, the manners which they brought from the north of Siberia. Ages have passed away without making any alteration in their customs and usages, but the conquest of the Crimea by the Russians within these few years has already effected a considerable alteration in their manners. By being deprived of their military arms, the Tartars have forgotten the use of them, while those invasions which formerly laid waste Russia and Poland, carrying horror and desolation in every direction, are no longer to be apprehended. The next generation will not retain even the remembrance of the conquests of its ancestors. The noble Tartars of the first class disdained all labor and knew no profession except that of arms. In times of peace they lived upon their estates. They carried points of honor to extremes, but never quarreled amongst themselves. Great and generous in their proceedings, they always received strangers with affability and politeness. They still retain the practice of killing a horse to make a feast on the arrival of a guest of distinction. On my arrival at the house of the brother of Atay Mirza, this prince said to me, "You are very welcome. As soon as I heard that you had come, I ordered a young mare to be killed, to give you a feast." The interpreter who accompanied me observed on this occasion that I should receive from my host the greatest mark of esteem, as a mare was the most precious article he had to offer me. These people are hospitable in the extreme, as they freely share with travelers whatever they possess. Both their vices and their virtues are rude, and seem as if they were purely natural. Hence outrages are seldom committed, and a person may travel through their country in the greatest security. The spirit of raping and plunder is the only thing that can bring the Tartars from their natural propensity to idleness. They require but little, as the necessaries of life and superfluous objects do not attract them. As riches are now only the result of labor, idleness excludes avarice. To do nothing is to them supreme happiness, and when a Tartar has exhausted himself by performing any labor, he throws himself down and smokes, while such is their eagerness in this recreation that they consider it as a disgrace for one Tartar to light his pipe at that of another hand. The Tartars love their wives, and polygamy seldom occurs amongst them. All the Tartars are Mahometans, but they are not so fanatical as the Turks. Being brought up with the prejudices of fatalism, they are convinced that everything is predestined, and are consequently resigned to whatever may happen. When in conversation with Atay Mirza on the difference between our dress and that of the Tartars, I observed to him, "Your cap perhaps would defend your head against the strokes of a saber?" To which he answered, "If the steel is destined to strike me, my bounce would not keep it off." I would not have mentioned this observation had not Atay Mirza been one of the best of the Tartars, and not altogether ignorant of philosophy. Though the Koran admits of but little toleration, it left the Christians much liberty in respect of their religion, and affected scarcely any contempt for strangers. The manners of the Tartars are like those of the Orientals, in total opposition to our own. Their physiognomy is of a religious kind, and their actions and gestures correspond with their look of sedateness. Their air is grave and phlegmatic, their walk steady, and their visage serious and austere. They speak slowly, hear without interrupting, and pass whole days with their legs across and their pipes in their mouths, while their belief in predestination affects them with an apathy which renders them insensible to every sort of regret or foresight. Wine and gaiety are banished from their repasts, while the women being sequestered from their society have neither the desire to please nor the enjoyment of pleasure. Hawking and hunting the hare form the greatest delight of the noble Tartars. In the towns, their amusements are reduced to meeting in the coffee houses, which, with respect to ours, bear no comparison but the name. There, sitting with their legs across, they pass whole days in smoking their pipes and talking at intervals with other lazy people who may drop in. Sometimes a singer recites a story or chaunts verses, accompanying himself with a bad instrument in the shape of a guitar. The assembly listens with the greatest attention and expresses the pleasure it receives by slight motions of the head. In general, the Tartar song is grave, harsh, and discordant. Their dance has the same grave character, as it consists of a continual agitation of all the limbs, though the feet scarcely ever quit the ground. When at Koslov with the chief of the police, I saw the performances of some Tartar merry andrews. One of them played a kind of pipe to a single actor, who placed in the middle of the room a glass full of ouzo, a Tartar drink made with fermented millet. The music striking up, he began to dance and throw himself about like a drunken man, falling several times to the ground, and in a way which induced me to think he would fall on the glass. But rising again with bursts of laughter, the music increased his activity, and he agitated all his limbs in keeping time. After a long continence of this fatiguing exercise, he fell down again, caught the glass in his mouth, and drank its contents without touching the vessel with his hands. The itch is the necessary and inevitable consequence of the quantity of bad and sour milk which the Tartars consume, and is therefore a very common disease amongst them. Even the nobles and their wives are not exempt from it. A certain disorder unknown in the Crimea before its conquest by the Russians is very generally extended, though without causing such great ravages as in other parts of the world. The Tartars have receipts for different diseases. I was witness to the application of the following remedy. A domestic of Atay Mirza, having fallen from his horse and had 2 of his ribs broken, his master made him drink water gruel till his belly was prodigiously inflated, and when he refused to take more, he was threatened with the bastinado odd, and drenched with the gruel. His food was nothing but rice added to the gruel, and this regimen was continued till the time of my residence, his master assuring me that the ribs would get into their places spontaneously. Without pledging myself for the efficacy of this singular remedy, it is a fact that the man was considerably better at the time of my departure. I had many opportunities of convincing myself of the ignorance of the Tartars in medicine and surgery. The remains of the family of Guerrera have taken refuge in Turkey, and there is no longer in the Crimea a single male descendant of those princes. The nobles and the clergy have preserved a great ascendancy amongst the Tartars. The great nobility of the country consisted of 5 families, each of whom had its particular bey. The eldest of the Mirzas of a house was always considered the chief of it. The first of those 5 great houses was that of the Chinians, and the Chirine Bey passed, next to the Khan, for the most considerable personage in the whole Crimea, though the Khalga Sultan and the Nuridai Sultan were superior to him in dignity. He had, however, like the Khan, his Khalga and his Nuradin, which the beys of the other houses had not. He was regarded as the defender of the kingdom and the liberty of the people, and possessed so much reputation and power that he several times disposed the Khan. Atay Mirza, the Chirine Bey, is between 50 and 55 years of age. His constitution is robust, and his countenance grave, haughty, and impressive. He made his first campaign under Krim Guray, and acquired by his bravery and talents a considerable military reputation amongst the Tartars. This prince is endued with much natural wit and an easy elocution. He is free and generous in his manner as a Mussulman, and he is very tolerant in matters of religion and is partial to strangers. His manners are gentle, and his table is frugally supplied. Atay Mirza enjoyed a considerable revenue on her clothes, and when the Crimea was taken possession of, the court of Russia granted him a pension of 2,000 rubles, which, however, was soon suppressed. Being now reduced to what he has left of his ancient domains, this prince can scarcely live without contracting debts. He appears alarmed at the future prospects which his family have before them, as he is much attached to his children. During my stay, I once supped with Atay Mirza at the house of the Musti. The repast was prepared and served in the manner of the country. Having excited the admiration of my host by my agility in jumping and tumbling, this exercise, to which I am partial, placed me in a situation of doing honor to the feast. The appetite with which I partook of all the dishes was remarked by the guests, and Atai Mirza, taking me by the hand, was so pleased at my despising their cookery that he invited me to pass a few days with him, and I promised that I should live entirely à la Tartare. I did not hesitate to accept the invitation, and was received by my host in the most amiable manner. We passed the day in riding on horseback and shooting with the bow and arrow. Nothing could exceed the strength and cleverness with which the prince drew the bow, and he rarely missed his aim, though the target was at a prodigious distance. The conversation for the rest of the day turned on France and Bonaparte. What I am most astonished at, said Mirza, is that this great man has done so much in such an enlightened age as ours. When he sailed with the expedition to Egypt, I thought it was his intention to re-establish the kingdom of Poland, and that he would disembark with this view on the shores of the Black Sea. But the great man had other designs. I know not, added he, whether I shall be deceived in my presentiments, but I think that within 4 years there will be a general war in Europe. Next to Atai Mirza, Sayyid Muhammad Effendi is the person who enjoys the greatest consideration. Sayyid Muhammad has a spirited and expressive physiognomy, and I think him a man of talents. At least he gave proofs of them in his journey to Petersburg. Being ordered to court and accused of conducting himself in a manner injurious to the interest of Russia, he returned to the Crimea and resumed his functions, after receiving a gold medal surrounded with brilliants, having on one side an effigy of the Emperor Alexander, and on the other an inscription, which states that the medal was given him as a recompense for the services which he had rendered the empire. He enjoys a pension of 200 rubles. And so that is quite the reading from this particular book, which I'll link below in the info section. But wow, a lot of different Tartar traits that this guy is referring to. I mean, this is just one witness to the Tartars, so there's no telling what they were like when they came from north of Siberia, like he mentions, and when they talk about just different things that they've done, different accomplishments, different history that Tartars have that no one really seems to know, that's been lost, eradicated even before this, even in the 1700s. So to try and think that we can grasp it now, it's getting tougher and tougher, because just all these different instances in the past, they knew that it was gone, and the history was gone, and the truth was kind of gone. So maybe it exists somewhere. I hope it does. It usually seems to. You never know. The books that we are able to view and read have a certain something about them that could be tampered with, or could be something. You know, every bit of information is controlled in this world, in this time, sadly. But the truth is going to come to light soon enough. I know we will. Whether we dig or explore north or south, we're going to find it. Bless you all.